Azure Function App, questions and answers. Question: what benefits does the premium plan offer over the consumption plan in Azure Functions? Answer: the premium plan offers enhanced performance, net integration, better scaling options, and the ability to run unlimited execution duration. Question: what is unique about the dedicated plan in Azure Functions? Answer: the dedicated plan allows you to run functions on dedicated VMs, providing the highest level of control over the environment. Question: how does trigger-based execution work in Azure Functions? Answer: trigger-based execution runs a function in response to specific events or conditions, such as a new blob in Azure Storage or a timer event. Question: how does Azure Functions integrate with the DevOps practices? Answer: Azure Functions supports C/CD pipelines through Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, or any third-party C/CD tools. Question: how do you implement access control in Azure Functions? Answer: access control in Azure Functions is implemented through Azure's Identity and Access Management (IAM) features. Question: can Azure Functions process multiple events simultaneously? Answer: yes, Azure Functions can process multiple events in parallel, leveraging the scalability of the service. Question: how do you manage app keys in Azure Functions? Answer: app keys can be managed through the Azure portal, Azure CLI, or programmatically via APIs. Question: where are the app files stored in Azure Functions? Answer: app files are stored in the root folder, accessible through the Azure portal or FTP. Question: can you encrypt configuration settings in Azure Functions? Answer: yes, sensitive configuration settings can be encrypted using Azure Key Vault. Question: can Azure Functions use custom authentication providers? Answer: yes, Azure Functions can be configured to use custom authentication providers through the implementation of custom bindings. Question: how does Application Insights improve debugging in Azure Functions? Answer: Application Insights provides detailed telemetry and diagnostics, including request rates, dependency rates, and exceptions, making debugging efficient and comprehensive. Question: how can you implement Managed Identity in Azure Functions? Answer: Managed Identity can be enabled through the Azure portal, allowing Azure Functions to authenticate to other Azure services without storing credentials. Question: is it possible to take backups of Azure Function apps? Answer: yes, you can configure backup policies in the Azure portal to create backups of your function app and associated resources. Question: how do you import an Azure function into API management? Answer: you can import an Azure function into API management directly from the Azure portal using the import function, specifying the function app and the function you wish to import. Question: can you create custom metrics in Azure Functions? Answer: yes, custom metrics can be created using Azure Monitor or Application Insights to capture specific data points beyond built-in metrics. Question: how do you clear cause settings in Azure Functions? Answer: you can clear cause settings in the Azure portal by removing all specified origins and saving the configuration. Question: how can you create alert rules in Azure Functions? Answer: alert rules can be created in Azure Monitor, specifying the metric and conditions that would trigger the alert. Question: can you automate the implementation of advisor recommendations? Answer: some advisor recommendations can be automated using Azure Policy, while others may require manual intervention. Question: what are the types of locks you can apply to an Azure Function app? Answer: you can apply either a read-only or a delete lock to an Azure Function app to protect its resources. Question: can you stream diagnostics data to multiple sinks in Azure Functions? Answer: yes, you can configure diagnostic settings to send data to multiple destinations like Azure Monitor, event hubs, or storage accounts. Question: How can you enable a health check endpoint in Azure Functions? Answer: you can enable a health check endpoint by installing the Microsoft.azure.webjobs.extensions.diagnostics.healthcheck NuGet package and creating a function with a health check trigger. Question: what HTTP methods are supported by an HTTP trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: the HTTP trigger supports all HTTP methods, including get, post, put, delete, and patch. Question: what expression language is used for timer triggers in Azure Functions? Answer: timer triggers use cron expression language to schedule function execution. Question: how does a blob trigger handle blobs that are updated multiple times? Answer: a blob trigger fires each time a blob is added or updated, including multiple updates to the same blob. Question: how can you configure a queue trigger to handle poison messages? Answer: you can configure a poison queue to manage messages that fail to process after a certain number of attempts. Question: is it possible to configure dead lettering with RabbitMQ trigger? Answer: yes, you can configure dead lettering to handle messages that are not successfully processed. Question: how do you specify the Kafka broker for a Kafka trigger in Azure Functions? Answer: the Kafka broker can be specified in the function.json configuration file under the broker list property. Question: can you use table trigger with Azure Table Storage and Azure Cosmos DB? Answer: yes, table trigger supports both Azure Table Storage and Azure Cosmos DB with Table API. Question: what types of events can an event grid trigger handle? Answer: an event grid trigger can handle all types of events supported by Azure Event Grid, including custom events. Question: is it possible to trigger a function for specific changes in a Cosmos DB collection? Answer: you can filter specific changes by leveraging the create_lease collection if not exists and start from beginning properties in the function configuration. Question: can you filter service bus messages in a service bus trigger? Answer: yes, you can use SQL-like filtering expressions in the service bus subscription to filter incoming messages. Question: how does the Event Hub trigger manage checkpoints? Answer: checkpoints are automatically managed, ensuring that each event is processed at least once. Question: can you use Azure Functions to process device-to-cloud messages from IoT Hub? Answer: yes, Azure Functions can be used to process device-to-cloud messages using an IoT Hub trigger. Question: what are common use cases for a signal trigger? Answer: signal triggers are often used for real-time web applications like chat apps, live dashboards, and collaborative editing platforms. Question: can you set up auto-scaling based on custom metrics in Azure Functions? Answer: yes, auto-scaling can be configured based on custom metrics through Azure Monitor. Question: how can you update extensions in Azure Functions? Answer: extensions can be updated via the Azure portal or by manually updating the extensions.csproj file. Question: how do you set up email notifications for alerts in Azure Functions? Answer: email notifications for alerts can be set up via Azure Monitor by specifying the email address in the alert action group. Question: can you set retention policies for diagnostic logs in Azure Functions? Answer: yes, retention policies can be set for diagnostic logs in Azure Storage, Azure Monitor, and Azure Event Hubs. Question: how frequently are advisor recommendations updated? Answer: advisor recommendations are generally updated every 24 hours but can vary based on the specific recommendation. Question: can locks be applied at both the resource group and individual resource levels? Answer: yes, locks can be applied at both levels to provide granular control over resource management. Question: how can you secure an HTTP trigger? Answer: you can secure an HTTP trigger using API keys, OAuth, or by integrating with Azure AD. Question: Is it possible to run a timer trigger on a specific instance? Answer: No. Timer triggers run on any available instance and cannot be bound to a specific instance. Question: Can blob triggers process large blobs? Answer: Yes. Blob triggers can process large blobs, but you may need to consider function timeout limits based on your plan. Question: How do you specify the queue name dynamically for a queue trigger? Answer: The queue name can be set dynamically using function.json configuration with input binding expressions. Question: Can you specify a dead letter exchange for RabbitMQ trigger? Answer: Yes. A dead letter exchange can be specified in the function configuration. Question: Is it possible to use wildcards in table trigger filters? Answer: No. Wildcards are not supported in table trigger filters. You have to specify the exact table name. Question: Can you configure event grid trigger to only fire on specific event types? Answer: Yes. You can filter events based on event types in the subscription configuration. Question: Can a Cosmos DB trigger work with multiple collections? Answer: No. A single Cosmos DB trigger is bound to a specific collection. Question: Is it possible to use service bus sessions with service bus trigger? Answer: Yes. Service bus trigger supports sessions by setting these sessions enabled property. Question: Can you manually set a starting point for an event hub trigger? Answer: Yes. The starting point can be manually set using consumer groups and offsets or timestamps. Thanks for watching.